There is a community at the Open University. You can connect with students that share the same passion, exchange ideas. We all try and help each other out.
Okay. Hopefully it's working now. Could someone maybe in... Okay, it is working, so I need to now mute the stream, and then now I can get it back up. So, unfortunately we've missed the first 2 laps trying to fix audio problems, but actually, in case you missed it, we had a somewhat big pile-up in turn 1, which resulted in someone getting front wing damage, and someone else spinning and losing a lot of time. Actually, a lot of people got front wing damage. And also, unfortunately, Mackenzie Khan has been forced to retire from terminal damage. But at the front, it seems like Quyll has been able to pull out a pretty significant gap, despite being on the hard tyres, so it seems like Quyll is on track to win this race, as the time delta is that fixed. Why is this game so bad? Okay, we just have to look at it visually, as we're riding on board with Ashley Robinson, who's unfortunately locked up, but remains within DRS, but I'm not sure how closely within DRS, because Kent has just set the fastest lap on the mediums and appears to be going quite well, and it seems like Robinson is struggling to keep up in the hards. As we see that Quyll has actually reset to track, which would be a 10-second time penalty to be applied to at the end of the race, but the delta has fixed itself now, but it seems like Robinson has dropped out of the crucial 1-second window to Kent, and also has about 10% less battery, but the detection point is on the exit, and unfortunately Robinson will not have DRS, but Quyll seems to have knocked themselves out of the race with that reset to track, which will be a post-race time penalty, which will be absolutely devastating if there is a safety car. It seems like Robinson has been able to catch up a bit on the straight by using a lot of battery, but we'll be hoping to get a good chicane to try and stay within DRS. Takes both curbs nicely, does not spin unlike a few people in qualifying, and will get DRS on the straight. However, the question is whether Kent will use the battery to try and pull out, as it seems like there's yellow flags in the second sector, as a Ferrari of Kopidlovsky has spun, but we're too focused on this battle for the lead to focus on that, and it seems like Robinson has been able to get back within DRS, which will enable them to save a lot of battery and just use the 3 straight line speed. I'll hide the spectator menu so we get a bit more screen. Going through the first corner nicely. Also, we have to remember that Robinson is on the hard tyres, which will probably be faster after about 10 laps. And it also seems like Robinson might be running marginally lower wings as well, but it's not clear at the moment, as it seems like Robinson will get DRS this lap. He's on 11% battery compared to 36% for Kent, which is a 25% difference, which if you were to dump 25%, you could gain about 4/10. However, Robinson is comfortably within DRS right now, and will gain a heap load of time every single straight from the DRS. Taking the chicane really nicely, but almost binning it, which will lose a bunch of time. However, it seems like Robinson has just been able to stick within the DRS of Jordan Kent. And as they are heading into the final braking zone, it seems like Robinson is really able to close in a lot. It seems like Robinson is running slightly lower wings overall, which combined with the DRS results in a pretty drastic straight line speed advantage, but it seems like Robinson has gotten a very strong exit relative to Kent, who feels the need to start going a bit defensive as the gap closes in, as it seems like unfortunately we've had a Williams spin on the exit of turn 16 on the minimap, but right now we're focusing on the battle for the lead, which seems to be quite a tight battle. as it seems like Kent is able to pull out a bit in the first sector with the combination of the better tyres and also slightly higher wings. If the pundit sitting on the end of the mic is to be believed, it seems like Robinson is actually using the battery to try and go for a move. We'll see whether Kent defends, goes for the racing line, and it seems like Robinson has got it going into the corner, but the red light on that Alpine is flashing, which is a signal to your competitors that you are low in battery, but Kent quite cleverly decides that it's better to just back out going into the chicane, because too wide for that chicane is just a recipe for someone cutting it and getting an instant time penalty. Seems like Robinson has gotten a very strong exit. Maybe Kent's tyres are beginning to go off. But Kent is able to close in a significant amount with a combination of DRS and also having a bit of battery remaining, as they get a fairly equal exit, but again Kent will have the battery to use as well as the DRS, and as we go through the first sector we'll be able to see whether Kent is able to close in a bit with the assumed slightly higher downforce, although I don't think it's a big margin. Like, I don't think it's not the difference between Musuros and Groenewegen, who I've just realised are both in the Red Bull, so they're doing divergent setups, which will lead to an interesting race. But Kent has been able to comfortably stick within DRS in the first sector, and is using a small amount of battery every single straight, which when you add it up will eventually result in Kent running out of battery, so they'll both be equal. But it seems like Robinson does have the upper hand right now, as unfortunately Khan has left the session after unfortunately picking up terminal damage, as we have Mitch Snape spinning in turn 1 in the McLaren. However, we ride on board with Kent, who I think only has a 15% battery advantage and is going to use all of it to try and get past this straight, as they're both fairly equal on battery at this point, as they're both very low. Kent goes for the inside and tries to make a move, but Robinson is wiser to it, as unfortunately Kent actually clobbers the inside curb, as we have a spinner of Bakalik, unfortunately, who is already a lap down, and it seems like Kent, clobbering that curb, has got a very poor exit, causing him to drop out of DRS. We'll see if he's able to catch back up in the first sector, but if he doesn't, it seems like Robinson has the upper hand in terms of pace at the moment, especially as the tyres start to age. But we'll see if Kent's slightly higher wings enable him to close in. It seems like, unfortunately, as we approach the protection point, he's 1.117 seconds off, which is not close enough to go for a move. But we now ride on board with Churek, who's trying to close into Skibor with the gap of 6/10 now, actually, but goes 7th and 6th and 5/10. And it seems like they're both very low in the battery, as Churek is not closing in too quickly, but is able to with the DRS. And Churek's tyres are just going to get better and better relative to them, as it seems like both McLarens have spun. One at turn 3, one at turn 7, which really will not be helping the McLarens in the Constructors' Championship. Seems like Churek is able to cut the chicane very nicely to gain a bunch of time, then uses the battery on exit to try and close into the Haas ahead. And it seems like with the DRS and the slipstream, Churek will be able to go for a move down the inside, as he's slightly ahead going into the braking zone and is able to hold on, but Evil will have the aid of the DRS in the short straight. However, Churek appears to get a decent exit whoa, that was some late braking for Skibor to go around the outside of Churek, who unfortunately will have to sit behind for another lap, but will likely be able to make a DRS pass. However, up in front, Kent is now within DRS of Robinson again, but is struggling to close in because of the lower wings. But we'll go back on board with Shurex as they go on this DRS streak, and it seems like Shurex unfortunately made a mistake which has caused him to lose a bunch of time, as unfortunately Zkielewski has gotten a time penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which is a pretty unfortunate error to make. However, up front, Kent is only 0.2 behind Robinson, so it seems like Kent has found a second life in those tyres and actually goes for a move down the inside, as Robinson is showing the long way round, but is behind at the detection point and crucially gets a significantly better exit to allow Robinson to have the lead for the first sector, as there's a yellow flag in turn 7. However, that seems to have resolved itself, as we see these two drivers make it through the tricky first sector. And meanwhile, Quyll has been very slowly catching up to the back of this train and is now only half a second away from DRS. However, we do have to bear in mind the 10-second time penalty, which will most likely be applied after the race. So unless Robinson and Kent have an absolute mare of a second half of the race, it seems like Quyll is not going to be realistically in contention for the win of this race, as Kent is half a second behind going into the slow bit. But unfortunately Robinson took way too much inside curb and actually loses the back end and is lucky to not lose more time. However, what this has done is allow Quyll to close back in to the front, and it's actually going to be a very tight race between Quyll and Kent. As we're riding on board with Robinson, as you can see, we'll see what happens ahead. And it seems like Kent is going defensive and forcing Robinson the long way round. But unfortunately for Quyll, he doesn't get a strong exit, which allows Kent to stay ahead going across the start-finish line. But we'll see if Quyll decides to go for a move into turn 1, which he decides to go for the outside, but is locked off by Kent, as that fighting has now allowed Robinson to close back in after that mistake. As Quyll actually decides to box off the mediums after just 10 laps, which is quite early for the one stop. But hards will make it to the end, but they won't be in the best state, as Robinson almost spins it on the curb. You can just hear the wheels spin and the tyres being off the ground. Now we can see that actually that Quyll has some pretty strong straight line speed, and we following right behind Kent through the slow section, as it seems like Kent has been able to... Ooh, that might be a corner cutting warning, as well as losing a lot of time, and that mistake might have dropped Robinson out of DRS, but fortunately for Ashley, he's still within the DRS zone, as Quyll is getting very close to Kent and tries to go around the outside, but Kent takes the defensive line on the inside. But all this does is allow Robinson to catch back up, as Kent decides to go into the pit to get rid of those medium tyres, which, to be honest, is a bit of a surprise for me, because I would have expected them to box around lap 13, 14-ish, because doing 18 laps on the hards is quite a long distance, especially if you've only done 11 on the mediums. As Robinson is just hovering outside the DRS range of Quyll, and unfortunately for him, oh, actually he's closed back in with an absolutely storming exit, so he will get DRS and close in significantly into the slow section, as it seems like Robinson is running quite low wings, although I've said that about a billion times at this point, as Quyll takes a bit more than ideal curb and almost clips the inside barrier, as Lapage in the chat has said 18 on hards is fine, which they will do 18 laps, although they won't be that quick at the end, and I think doing an extra lap on mediums would help. As Lakers is also sending a bit more stuff in chat. It says fuel burn is bigger than the wear delta for 20 plus laps. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it's something. As we have 8 people watching the stream now, so that's a pretty decent amount for a tier 3 stream, I guess, as we saw us now pits at the end of lap 12 to do 17 laps on the hards. But meanwhile, up in front, Robinson is just hovering inside the DRS of Quyll and might be trying to save battery or not, as Robinson might actually try to go for a move, as we unfortunately have a spinner of one of the Haas's in the final corner, but Robinson is going to be close enough to try and go for a move, which makes Quyll brake quite late to defend the position, but fortunately they both make it through the corners. Quyll has actually caught a small snap of oversteer, and as they go through the chicane, they're both fairly equal. Or maybe Quyll has gotten a slightly better exit, but remember the DRS is quite powerful on such a long straight. As we have Robinson again going to try and go down the inside, but Quyll is able to brake late and maintain the position going into the corner. It appears to go a bit wide on exit, which might compromise the speed in the straight a bit, but it seems to be going fine as they now head into turn 1, as unfortunately Groenewegen picks up, I believe it's the first time penalty for warnings, which is quite impressive considering how many laps everyone's done and that there's only been one penalty so far, which is a bit less than I was expecting. It seems like we have a yellow flag on the pit entry, which has now resolved itself. But Quyll gets a very good exit as Robinson actually bottoms out on the curb, which will compromise the exit. Although the DRS will allow Ashley to close in a significant amount. As if we... And behind it seems like Kent, on the much pressure hard, is going to try and get past Turek as quickly as possible on the newer tyres to make sure that Quyll and Robinson aren't able to get the overcut, as it seems like Robinson might have actually dropped out of DRS there, but again is barely within, so we'll be able to close back into like 6, 7 tenths heading into the final corner. Right now the gap between Quyll and... Actually, Quyll goes into the pits on lap 14, which is a little early, but not especially early. 15 laps on the mediums is possible, but they will feel somewhat second-hand at the end. We'll actually ride on board with Quyll to see where he comes out relative to Kent, who has gone for the undercut. I expect that Kent would have lost a bit of time on tyre warm, as we can actually see in the background that Kent has been going for a move on Turek, and it seems like Quyll has been able to perform the overcut on Kent, who is 1.8 seconds behind, however has the warm tyres for now, so should hopefully be able to close in, but he isn't closing in as fast as he would be hoping for, as once Quyll's tyres warm up they will be a decent amount faster. And if Robinson were to pit this lap, he'd probably come out just between where these two are right now, although that would be on cold tyres, which do not have that much grip, as unfortunately we have the McLaren spinning. Is that Robinson who's spun? No, it isn't. So it seems like Keeler's actually been able to get the tyres up to temperature quite quickly and will be able to stay out of the DRS of Kent unless the mediums decide at the end of the race that they want to go on strike or something, and then maybe a safety car allows them to close in. With a yellow flag in sector 1. I'm not sure why, because no one had stopped them back. Robinson heads around for another lap to try and get the freshest tyres possible for the end of the race, as it seems like we have a position swap between Quyll and Musuros. If you remember from qualifying, Musuros was running quite low winds, so we'll see if he's able to keep up with the Williams in sector 1. It seems like he's actually struggling quite a bit with the lack of downforce. He seems to be able to keep up, but it's not ideal running low downforce, so we'll see how much he's able to close in. And it seems like Quyll also has a lot more battery that could be used, but it seems like he's not using it. As Musuros opens the DRS and actually isn't going as quick as... Actually, 333 is a pretty decent amount of speed. You're not using battery. As someone has joined the lobby. I think this was someone who was supposed to turn up, but it's been a bit late. Go and check the drivers. So I don't think Bobek is on the list of drivers, so some road person joining the lobby as Musuros is able to get a massive overspeed with the DRS and the low wings, but unfortunately goes super deep into the final corner, giving the position back as Robinson has now come into the pit, so we'll see where Ashley emerges relative to everyone, and he's actually dropped behind Kent, so Keeler has been absolutely rapid, and it seems like Robinson might even lose out on DRS with the cold tyres. But we have to remember that Keeler does have a likely impending time penalty. I think Groenewegen started 13? So I'm not sure. As we actually see Robinson trying to warm up the tyres, as I've been asked to increase the volume of my mic, which I will do now. When Robinson gets his tyres up, the question is whether he'll be able to close in, as losing the back end like that via the chicane really does not help your lap time, as unfortunately I think that's Hoy, or maybe it was Mitch, who spun in turn 12, but we have Keeler take over the lead from Michler, who is yet to box, but Robinson is slowly closing back within the DRS of Kent, and we'll be hoping to get a strong exit to be back within for the next DRS zone, as unfortunately he was more than a second behind at the detection point, which means you do not get DRS, but we'll be hoping to stay within a second during the first sector to get DRS for the crucial long straight to close in before the slow section, as they like to call it, as Mitch appears to have... Has he binned it on the straight? What's happened? He's DNF on the straight, it seems like. But meanwhile Robinson has been able to close up at a rate of knots and has to actually lift out to avoid contact that might be sent to the stewards, who will have to investigate it, as Robinson actually goes deep. That allows Kent to get a switchback on Robinson and gain the position back, but Robinson will have DRS along the next straight, as the gap to Keeler has ballooned up to 6 seconds, which might be able to get out of range of a possible time penalty for the reset to track on lap 3, I believe. And as Robinson is able to go for a move around the outside of Kent, this time doesn't go as deep, and Robinson has been able to get very good exits off this corner all race. She was able to pull out 6/10 before the DRS even opens. As we now ride on board with Kent, who's going to try and sit within Robinson to see if he can be dragged along by the newer mediums and DRS to try and stick within penalty range of Quyll, who unfortunately appeared to do a reset to track on lap 3, which this season is 10 seconds and 3 penalty points. Because it seems like Kent has dropped out of DRS. Though he does have a lot of battery, he could choose to burn if he wants to, but decides to not use it. As well, it seems like he's running slightly higher wings. He's losing a bit of time to Robinson up ahead, who is taking the slow section quite nicely and is beginning to close on Michla, who is yet to box and is probably hoping for a safety car, or maybe planning to go for softs, although softs are not the strongest race tyre at any track. At most tracks, the mediums are the tyre you want to be on, but that does mean that Robinson will gain DRS from Michla, and if Michla decides to not box, we'll hopefully be trying to get past before turn 1, so that he doesn't get held up, as Michla decides to box after 18 laps on the hards, and Robinson gets another dose of DRS, and will maybe start trying to close in on Quyll, in case Quyll does not get a penalty, or if Robinson doesn't know that Quyll has a penalty inbound. As Michel has decided to go for softs, which, before they did the tyre pressure and tyre temp patch, they could do about 11-12 laps, but 10 laps on them is going to be a bit of a struggle, as we have a spinner in the chicane. I believe that is Pavlakovic in the Alfa Romeo, who's unfortunately doing a lot worse than his teammate is right now. It seems like Musuros has been able to close within DRS of Tuabti. We're just checking the battery and they're both very equal. And in turn, Tuabti is also closing into Quyll, who I think had to box lap 1 based off the age of the tyres. We'll actually check. It seems like Musuros has been able to get a lot more speed and unfortunately clips the inside of Tuabti, which really costs him a lot of time, but he will get DRS, and with his literally 0-0 wings will likely be right on the back of him, either going into the final corner or turn 1. So Quyll has made a stop, but that was on lap 1, which unfortunately means that the tyres probably will not make it to the end, unless he's deciding to be really brave. But the fact that he's been able to somewhat keep up is quite impressive given the age of the tyres, as unfortunately Zilewski has picked up a 3-second time penalty for accumulation of track limit corners, as Musuros is struggling to keep within DRS with the lower wings and might in fact actually drop out of DRS. It's going to be very tight as we go through turn 7, as he goes completely wide, and that loses a heap of time, causing him to be 3/10 behind, but he does have about 5% more battery and also the lower wings, so he is closing in, although not at a very quick rate. I suspect that although he is running lower wings than everyone else, it's not drastically lower, unlike Groenewegen, who's literally running 50-50, but probably not 50-50, as Musuros really isn't taking the chicane that well. We'll ride on board with Turek, who's following behind Groenewegen through the chicane, is able to keep roughly close. But if you remember from Quyll, Groenewegen was running literally infinite downforce, as Turek's already gained 2/10, 3/10 now, a lot of time. Yeah. As Pavlakovic has retired from the session, in the pit lane. Not that dramatic. As Turek as well has much newer mediums, 6 laps on the mediums is a pretty big deal at any track. As Groenewegen makes a late move on the straight which causes Turek to bump into the back. That might be a penalty if it's sent to the stewards after the race, but Groenewegen is able to stay in front and is able to maintain the gap with the higher downforce. However, the newer tyres on Turek have enabled him to stay within the DRS zone, and he's only 4 tenths behind as they head into the long straight, where the lower wings will make a pretty significant difference to the straight line speed, as Turek just flies past Groenewegen, who can't put up any defence whatsoever. We'll see if Groenewegen is able to keep up through the slow speed section, and then might be able to do something with the DRS, although I suspect not, as Pim is deficient in the battery department, and taking that inside curb really does not help the cause. As it seems like Pim will get DRS, but is barely even gaining any time. That is just how much wings Pim is running, which is unfortunate for them. But meanwhile, Robinson has very slowly been chipping away at the lead. Last time I checked it was something like 4 seconds. Now it's 2.6. Maybe the fresher tyres on Robinson are making a pretty big difference. We'll go back and forth with some people who are battling on track, as Ivanek has unfortunately had a spin in turn 3, which will really hurt the tyres, and also banging the wall is not known to have a positive effect on the front wing integrity. And it seems like Groenewegen has actually dropped out on DRS whilst having DRS on the DRS street, which just highlights how difficult a high wings setup is on this game. Like, if you're running 30-30, you'll just be nowhere on the streets. However, Groenewegen is able to carry an immense amount of speed through the chicane. However, the age of the tyres is really playing into the hands of Turek, who's just able to maintain the gap in the corners and then just drive off in the straights with the lower wings. And Groenewegen doesn't even have I'm using the default setup, which is high wings, because at Miami the setup they give you is 8-18 wings, which is quite low. Robinson has been able to close in another tenth or two, but might have got a warning there. We'll actually check the race director to see what penalties what? Race director. Thank you. So Quyll, no warnings for track limits, and Robinson appears to have 1 warning so far on lap 11, which might have been, I think that was when he cut this chicane here, which we saw when riding on board. But quite a bit further back, Quyll has been able to close in at an absolute rate of knots to Ivanek, who unfortunately has front wing damage and much older medium tyres, so is unable to put a fight up. Although he could choose to drain the battery in the street to see if he can make a move, but I think he's just accepted that this is a lost cause, and that Quyll on the brand new softs will be significantly faster. Meanwhile, Robinson's closed in another tenth to Quyll. We'll see how much time Ivanek loses with the combination of the old tyres and the damage. It's a lot of time. It's an absolute heap load of time. And that also won't be ideal for the front wing. Yeah, losing a second through 6 corners is really not great. But out front, it seems like Robinson has made a mistake and is now 2.6 seconds behind Quyll. As we actually have a battle for 15th place on track, as Sienko, if that's how it's pronounced, probably isn't, almost loses the rear, but appears to still be within DRS, although in much older hard tyres. As he seems to drops out of DRS and then gets a massive boatload of wheel spin. But he does have the battery to be able to try and close in if he wants to, but he seems to be saving it for now, probably hoping that the Zikilevsky makes some mistake. As Simco actually heads for the pits, probably to strap on a set of brand new softs and see if he can set the fastest lap. Actually, he's decided to retire from the race. I guess that makes sense if you're in last place. Unless there was like some crazy safety car, you are not going to score any points unless... Actually, if he was a lap down, which he might have been, that means that you're going to be a lap down under the safety car, which basically means race over. The race seems to have settled down a bit now, with the closest gap being between Groenewegen and Turek at 2.6 seconds, but Koziel on the relatively new soft tyres has just put in the fastest lap, and it's closing in rapidly to Groenewegen, who is on much older mediums. So despite the high downforce on Pim, you'll be losing a bunch of time. Is it raining? Or is that just my graphics card trying to trick me? Is that rain? There's some weird particle effects on my screen. I don't think it's rain. Is it on the other cars? Yes, it is. Is it raining now? Or has my graphics card, which is only a month old, decided that it wants to die already? But Koziel is able to close in a bit to Groenewegen, actually quite a lot with the newer softs, and will close in another heap of time. That's even a unit on the straights with Pim's infinity wings, so it seems. I don't think it's 50-50, because if Pim was running 50-50, they'd be behind Koziel right now. That is how slow 50-50 wings are on a straight. It seems like Koziel is able to use the newer and softer compound to close in, as this rain particle effect on my screen has persisted. So if we have some decent rain on the final lap, it will be very spicy to see if anyone decides to box for inters, although I do not think that will happen, as Ivanek in 11th has decided it's time to pull into the pit lane, as Koziel is able to close in somewhat rapidly to Groenewegen, who is very low in battery, and Ivanek has boxed for inters. So my graphics card wasn't trying to trick me. The intermediate tyres on this game are actually quite powerful. They will work in the dry until they overheat. But if it even starts drizzling, overheating isn't much of a problem, as Koziel has been able to close to within DRS range of Groenewegen, and is gaining an absurd amount of time. It was 8/10 at the start of the straight, now it's 4/10. It will be interesting to see if there is a sudden downpour at the end of the race, because the slicks on this game are quite tricky in wet conditions, and also softer compounds of tyres fare a lot, as Koziel absolutely sends it, presumably missing a braking marker board, or guessing the wrong one, which is quite easy to do at this track, and then just goes straight on at turn 1, but fortunately no contact is made, and they're both able to continue on with their races. It seems like with the additional battery, tyres and lower rings that Koziel will be able to sail straight past Groenewegen, as he is using the battery on the straight. Yeah, it's a pretty easy move. Nothing that Pim could really do. That's the problem with running higher wings. Even if it's fast in theory, you just can't do anything in the race. As Robinson has closed in a tenth of a second to the lead over the past 3 laps or something. But we have to remember that Quyll is likely to be investigated for the reset to track. Actually, let's see how well Ivanek's tyres are doing. Not that well. I just don't think it's raining heavily enough. As Quyll, who's actually not that far behind, has just started the final lap of the race. So we'll see how well Ivanek is able to stay on. Not too bad considering it's intermediates, and intermediates actually are not much worse than 15 lap old hards, even when it's bone dry. We'll actually see. They both have a penalty, but we'll see how much penalty. They both have 3 seconds, so this will be full position. It seems like Ivanek is able to close in. It will be interesting to see whether the DRS is enough. Although we do have to bear in mind that unless Quyll is able to overtake them, this will not be their final lap. So it will rain a bit more, which will definitely swing the favour into Ivanek's hands. However, we do have to bear in mind that the Inters might start to get a bit hot, as Robinson has actually closed in quite a bit of time to Quyll, as Ivanek actually goes for a move around the outside on the intermediate tyres and will be behind at the detection point, and is short shifting all the way up to 6, which suggests that there is absolutely no grip. As Quyll crosses the line in first place on track, as Dzikilevsky unfortunately runs wide, and as the track is continuing to get wetter and wetter, it seems as though the hards are going to just keep falling out, as DRS is disabled, although the track to me looks completely bone dry. I think it might be a graphical glitch, as they both actually run quite wide. Seems like the Haas has been able to stick with the Aston Martin surprisingly well considering how wet the track is. However, the Aston Martin has a significant battery advantage, which will be used to try and stay ahead. And I just think that the Inters are the fastest tyre right now. Although it doesn't seem wet on screen, I'm pretty sure it is wet. And that the graphic settings on this game are just a bit bugged out. Oh, that's not ideal. That was a massive moment. I think that's just demonstrating how little grip there is. That one extra lap is really causing a significant loss of grip, as on my screen there was actually quite a bit of rain falling down, although I think the streaming compression will mean that you cannot see it, but trust me, it is raining. As we have Ivanek crossing the line now, as the Haas decides to do a 180 over the line. And the AI actually turns it into a 360, as that is race over for now. I don't know who I will drive of the day to. Maybe I do give it to Robinson, like the game. It's going to be a hard choice though. We'll go to the race director, so the steward, who is myself, and have this information. The list is a lot longer than PC F3 last week, where I had to commentate. And I'm sorry if there's been some flickering on stream. I'm honestly not sure what's happening. OBS says that I've dropped 0 frames. But you never know with these things. So, race result. Quyll finished first on track, however might have a penalty for that reset to track. And have Robinson in second, Kent in third, Chirabti in fourth, Musuros in fifth, Michelin sixth, Truex in seventh, Koziel in eighth, Groenewegen in ninth, Hoy in 10th, and that is the points finishes, as well as Koziel will get a bonus point for the fastest lap, most likely, as I believe that the race is finished now. Well, it has. So apparently the UI was flickering. I'll see that when I watch back the stream later, but I think I'll say bye for now. Hopefully there'll be some stream next week, but I don't think I'll be able to do it, unfortunately.